all been joining on a journey of finding the hidden life with Christ, digging deeper into discovering Jesus Christ. The culmination of this whole series is Easter. We want to inform you about Easter. The Sunday before, Palm Sunday, we'll have 2 services as regular. On Good Friday, we'll have a family-friendly service here on Friday night. And then again, we'll have our Easter services on Sunday. Keep on coming. Bring your neighbors and friends too. We want them to see the true story about Easter. Martha's Kitchen time! 4 times a year, we get to help feed the hungry in our community. We actually get to join Jesus in what he has asked us to do. He doesn't need us, but we need him, and we need to serve others. So next week, we'll be handing out tickets for food items for Martha's Kitchen. Come ready, come willing to serve, and come help make those in our community full with not only in their bellies, but the love of Jesus.
Who out there is in the need for speed? Church of the Rock is hosting a Pinewood Derby event. Cars can be purchased in the lobby after the service. Let's go racing, boys and girls of all ages. Boogity, boogity, boogity.
Ladies, the men just finished ISI, a day of refreshing for all of them, and now it's our turn. We're hosting the Northern New England Spring Conference, and it'll be all day on a Saturday morning from 9 until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Come get away, spend time with girls. The speaker's gonna be fabulous. And guess what? Sign-ups are today in the lobby.
So what makes you instantly afraid? I mean, like, absolutely bonkers. When you see it or even think about it, you panic. Well, a 2014 YouGov poll found that Americans are most afraid of, guess what? Snakes. Anybody afraid of snakes? Hey, you're part of the 64% of Americans that are most afraid of snakes. Then come heights, public speaking, and spiders. Yeah. I think I could put spiders right up there with snakes. I don't know. They kind of do their thing. 29% of us are afraid of needles or getting a shot. 24% of us are afraid of crowds. I guess that isn't you guys. And 13% of us are afraid of clowns. So they actually made the top 13. When we experience a scary stimulus, the information that we're taking in, whether we're hearing it or whether we're seeing it, takes 2 roads in our brains. And scientists call these the low road and the high road. The low road is fast and messy. A fear response, say you see that snake or you see that spider crawling on the chair behind you or whatever. The fear response takes only 12 milliseconds to get from seeing it to a little place in your brain called your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that tells the rest of your body, we're out of here. Initiates a fear response. This signal completely bypasses your conscious mind. You are in full fear mode before you even know it. Your heart rate jumps up, your pupils dilate, your veins constrict to send more blood to your major muscles. You need all your major muscles when you see a spider. Your blood glucose increases. Major systems like digestion and your immune system sort of stand down so that your energy can go to more important things. Your brain stops focusing on small tasks. It has one job and one job only, your survival. All of that is initiated 12 milliseconds after you see the spider. Now, the high road is going on at the same time. This is another pathway in your brain. It's slower and it's more precise. The same scary stimulus goes into another part of the brain, your sensory cortex, where you actually perceive it. And then it is sent over to another part of your brain that analyzes this information. After you have had what is really a very short period of time to analyze this information, then this other part of your brain tells the amygdala whether this is really a threat or not. Now, that second road, the high road, takes 250 to 300 milliseconds. So do the math. 12 versus 300. So what happens is, after you've had your panic, your brain may go, it's not really a big deal. And you go, and that little process happens very quickly because you have this low road going and the high road going. If the high road says, no, that really is a dangerous spider, like it's got the little hourglass on it or whatever, then it will agree with the low road and you're going to be running even faster. If, on the other hand, the threat isn't that big of a deal, then you're going to stand down. So that's why when the little garter snake slithers out from the woodpile, I jump. I jump before I even know what I'm doing. And then, as I'm jumping, I'm looking at that snake and I'm going, oh, it's a garter snake. It's harmless. Oh, it's cute. It's no problem. It eats bugs and so on. Low road got me out of the way just in case. High road assures me it wasn't a poisonous snake, and I survived. And that's what's going on in our minds. That I think about what it's like when you're driving the car and something happens and you are on the brake or you start to swerve before you even thought about it. And then as you're even doing that, you're evaluating whether this is an accident about to happen or just a close call. Low road gets your foot on the pedal before you even know that there's a reason. High road has you processing so that you are thinking your way through this situation. Now, Mark tells us a story about a journey with Jesus that suddenly went terribly wrong. Jesus had spent the day teaching the crowds on the western side of a lake called the Sea of Galilee. It's just a big lake, 8 miles wide, 13 miles long, sitting in a deep, deep valley. The Sea of Galilee, the surface of it is at 700 feet below sea level. The mountains go 2,000 feet above sea level, so you can imagine that weather could be pretty exciting in this little bowl. So Jesus was teaching. He was sitting in the boat while he taught. At the end of the day, it was time to move on. And we read in Mark chapter 4, beginning with verse 35, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. In other words, he never got out of the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. So now, one thing we know about the Sea of Galilee, people who have studied the weather in that part of the world will tell you, is that violent winds can come down off those high mountainsides and drop down into this deep valley. And this can happen almost instantaneously, without any warning. It'd be a nice day, no big storms going on, but then all of a sudden the cooler air up on the mountainsides drops down into the valley and creates a violent squall. Well, imagine this happening after dark. You're halfway across the lake, 4 miles out, 4 miles to go, something like that. And there you are, it's a calm day, calm night, nothing really going on. All of a sudden, the wind comes up. And it doesn't just come up, it comes up with like this 30 or 40 mile an hour blast. And all of a sudden, if you've ever seen Lake Champlain, you can watch this happen when a thunder squall comes across. A flat lake can have waves this high. I've literally seen it happen just in a matter of minutes. And you had no warning. If you were out in a canoe or if you were out in a kayak, you'd be in big trouble. And imagine that happening in the dark. You don't see the wind, of course you never do, but you can't even see where it's coming from because you can't see the water. You just suddenly feel this blast, and then the waves are coming up, and you don't see the waves either in the dark. All you see is, all you feel is water coming over the side, and people are bailing, and people are shouting. Have you ever been in a boat when things start going wrong? For some reason, everybody just makes noise. Everybody's shouting and screaming at each other and thrashing around, and the louder the wind, the louder you're yelling, and that's what was going on this boat. In other words, everybody's amygdalas were like going crazy, just blowing up inside their heads. But Mark adds one more little detail about this boat ride in the storm. He says in verse 38, Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. Now, the boat that Jesus and the disciples were in was about 26 feet long. I've got a picture of it here, I think, the next one. There you go. It's about 26 feet long. They actually found one of these boats buried in the mud. They dated it. It came from exactly the same time that this story took place, from the time of Jesus. And it was a boat that could hold 15 people. It would be really full. Had 4 oars and a steering oar, a mast, all that sort of thing. Interestingly enough, it had a little deck in the front or the bow of the boat. It had another bigger deck in the stern because they would stand up there to cast out their nets. They had to get sort of a vantage point. And underneath the stern deck, there was enough space to crawl into. You wouldn't get wet. You were in the most peaceful part of the boat. And but also in that space, they had sandbags. And this was a practice that continued up at least until maybe 100 years ago, when these boats didn't have keels or any way to balance themselves, so they put bags of sand in the boat. And if you needed to put more weight on one side of the boat versus the other, you just grabbed the sandbag and moved it over. So they used them for ballast. But they had a special name for these sandbags. They called them the pillow. And even to, like I say, 100 years ago, the Arabic language that was spoken on this same lake, with people fishing in boats that were probably very similar to the boats of ancient times, they still talked about the pillow. And that's the word Mark uses. He says Jesus was asleep on the pillow. Not a pillow, but the pillow, meaning it was part of the boat's equipment. Well, the terrified disciples were dumbfounded that he would be sleeping while they were fighting for their lives. So they woke him up with what you might call the Jonah question. Verse 38b says, the disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Now, if you know the story about Jonah, you remember that Jonah was a runaway prophet. He was supposed to be doing God's work. He was supposed to be going to a foreign place and talking about God and calling the people to repentance. And he refused, and he got on a boat and went in the opposite direction. And God sent a big storm. And there he was out in the middle of the Mediterranean. But when the storm broke, he was down below sleeping while everybody else was fighting for their lives. And so they woke him up with this question, Jonah 1:6. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." Well, you know the story. He admitted that he was the problem. He had been running away from God. He says, "You got to have to throw me overboard, and then everything will be fine." And they're like, "Oh, we can't do that." He says, "Yeah, you have to do that." So they throw him overboard, and then you know how the fish comes or the whale and swallows Jonah and carries him around and brings him to shore. And the storm goes away, and the water becomes perfectly calm. At the end of the story, these pagan mariners worship the true God because he saved their lives. Well, now, imagine, here are these disciples looking at Jesus. They're in a boat. They're in a storm. Jesus is a prophet. He's sleeping while they're fighting for their lives. And they ask him the same question that the mariners asked Jonah. They say, "Don't you care if we drown? What's the deal? How can you be sleeping right now?" I wonder if the disciples were asking themselves, what kind of prophet is this Jesus anyway? Is he another Jonah? I mean, is he the real deal? Or is he just sort of somehow disconnected from this whole process? Well, Jesus got up from under the stern and took charge of the situation. In verse 39, we read, he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down. It was completely calm. The words that Jesus used when he spoke to the wind and the waves are the same words that he used when he took authority over evil spirits that were tormenting human beings, people who had lost their ability to think and act rationally and were completely consumed by these evil forces within them. Here was the Lord of creation, once again rebuking the demonic forces of chaos and evil, represented by this strong wind and the waves and the forces of death that would take them all down to the bottom of the lake if they were let go. Here was the Lord of creation restoring his creation to its proper order, just with words. Of course, that's how the creation story began. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be," and there was. And once again, now the Lord of creation is present, bringing order to that chaos. This prophet was no Jonah. This was Jonah's God, present in human form. Then Jesus turned to the disciples and he asked them a couple of questions. Verse 40, he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Now, the word he used for afraid speaks to someone who lacks physical and moral courage. It means, why are you cowardly and failing to do your duty in danger? It's a very negative term. It doesn't just mean to have a fear response, but it means to be kind of craven and, again, cowardly and shirking away from what you should do. He says, why are you shirking from this battle? And this is the mindset of a person whose brain has taken the low road into fight or flight and gotten stuck there. Just plain overwhelmed by the fear, by the terror, by the oppression of the situation, and it's basically either gone into a fetal position or is running as fast as they can. Then Jesus asks a second question, you see. Do you still have no faith? And that question is challenging to remember that there's another option when it seems like the world is turned upside down. Now, I don't know where you are in your life right now. I don't know whether you're facing things that present you with a lot of anxiety, things to keep you up at night, things that you worry about. Maybe some big dark thing that just takes all the air out of the room, and you look at it and you go, oh, I can't even think about that. It just overwhelms me. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've been through a situation that you just knew was way bigger than yourself. If you've been there, then you know what the low road feels like. We all do. We don't even have a choice about that initial reaction of fear. It can paralyze us. It can just overwhelm us, or it can make us just run for our lives. But Jesus is saying to those disciples the same thing he wants to say to you and me this morning. There is another road. There's another option when the fear response kicks in. Whether it's the immediate fear of being in a threatening situation, or whether it's that slow, grinding fear of worry and anxiety that can just work on us for day after day and night after night, make it impossible to get to sleep and distract us from the things that we need to be doing and that we want to be doing, drive us into maybe a deep depression or into being afraid of everything around us. He says there's another path. It's the path of faith. You see, Jesus' brain was wired just like the disciples' brains. Jesus was not Superman without his cape, lying in a boat, taking a nap. He was a human being just like you and me. He was born, as we know, put in a little manger. He lived his life here. He was hungry. He got tired. He breathed the same kind of oxygen that you and I breathe as we go through our day. And he would eventually give his life. He would die just as human beings die. All human beings die. Jesus had a brain just like you and me. Why do I say that? Because that means he had a low road and a high road in his brain, in his spirit. When the storm came up, if he had been awake at all, he would have heard the shrieking wind, felt the waves pounding the boat, heard the water sloshing in the bilge, felt his disciples' wave of anxiety and terror that was gripping them. But he refused to give in to the panic of the low road. Instead, he took a different road. He took the high road, remembering in the middle of all of that chaos that the all-powerful God he served was the Creator who had given him the authority over all that chaos around him. And just as Jesus had silenced a demonic force that oppressed a man in a synagogue, he could now silence the powers that threatened him and his disciples. You see, this is what faith is all about. It's about taking the high road when your physical response is the low road. When you are in that fight or flight, when you're in that survival mode, when everything in you wants to either lash out or run for cover. And all you have to do is just go into that place, and your body is going to make the decisions for you. Your mind is just going to function at that sort of lizard brain level and just thrash you around in some survival exercise. At that moment, Jesus is saying there's a high road. It's a high road that's defined when you follow Jesus by the word faith. Understand, faith is not something that we just sort of have, sort of like add to our kit of life values and life accomplishments. It is a response to a situation in which we would normally feel doubt and fear. Faith happens in those moments. It's something that we evoke, that we plug into when we say, the God who loves me and cares for me, the God who bought me with the blood of his Son, is right here with me. And even though it feels like the world's coming apart, he is right here. He's not going to let me down. In fact, he is giving me authority to act as his child in this situation and to take authority over things that are bringing fear to me versus my being the victim in this situation. You see, Jesus could sleep through a howling gale. Jesus could stand up to the wind and to the waves because he was plugging into a different reality than what the low road was automatically saying inside of his brain and inside the disciples' brains. Jesus was remembering what Isaiah said in Isaiah 26:3. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. There's faith again, right? Trusting because they trust in you. The storm wasn't any less powerful where Jesus was. It wasn't any less frightening to him as a human being. The thought of drowning was not something that he just tossed off as, not a big deal. He was plugging into a different reality. As he processed that all of those stimuli that were coming, and they were all negative, they were all frightening, he was processing them through faith. And that's something you and I need to learn to do. In fact, we get a whole lifetime to practice it. And every stage of life gives us new opportunities, doesn't it? To deal with things that maybe we've never thought about before. Situations that we've never had to deal with before. We've been through a rough time over the last 2 or 3 weeks as a country, as a society. From Valentine's Day, with the loss of the lives of so many children and teachers. And then the scary, the situation in Fairhaven. Not to mention the fact that we had lockdowns at BFA and in St. Albans and Colchester and Fairfax. And everybody's basically on eggshells now, wondering what's going to happen next. In the middle of a situation like that, there's a storm, a very real storm, a very terrifying storm. It makes us wonder whether we put our kids on the bus or whether we drop them off at school, whether they're going to be safe in that place. I mean, it used to be that was the safest place. You put your kid, send them to school. It's like, well, nothing's going to happen there. Now, all of a sudden, that's been pulled out away from us. Well, this is a situation that calls us, as followers of Jesus, not only to recognize the threat, but also to say, Lord, how do I walk the high road with you in this situation? What does that look like? Hey, it certainly doesn't mean taking chances when something dangerous is going on. It certainly doesn't mean that we stop caring or that we stop having a normal concern for the safety of our loved ones. But it means we don't have to be consumed. It doesn't have to define us. And the same is true when you deal with that health emergency or that health problem that just basically rocks your world. Or perhaps it's the health problem of a loved one, a parent or a friend or a child. No, it's a serious thing. Yes, we need to do everything we can do to fight the disease or to get the treatment we need and so on. But in that inner place, that place where we're talking about the hidden life that we have with Jesus, in that place, Jesus is saying, come walk the high road with me. Put your trust in me that I'm going to be there for you. Well, when Jesus finished rebuking the storm, the boat now rocked gently in a sudden calm. Overhead, clouds parted and the moon lit a shimmering path on the water. The disciples gaped at each other in the dim light. And in hushed whispers, Mark tells us they asked each other the final question. Verse 41, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. And Mark tells us now they were experiencing a totally different kind of fear. Remember that first word that he used was the word for a kind of cowardly, craven response? Well, now he says they were afraid with a great fear. That's how the literal Greek goes. And this is the word for fear that he uses here, phobos, is the word he will use when he describes Peter's fear. On the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus is transformed into all of his glory, and Peter doesn't know what to say, it says because he was afraid. This is the same word he's going to use when he talks about the women at the empty tomb. The last thing in the copy of Mark that we have, the version of Mark, is that it says that they said nothing because they were afraid. This is the fear that John, the Revelator, felt in the book of Revelation when he saw Jesus in his heavenly glory and power. The beginning of the book, Revelation 1:17, he says, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. And at that point, Jesus comes to him and says, don't fear. A different kind of fear. This is the fear a human being feels when in the presence of the Almighty God. It's not merely the instant of terror we experience when our amygdala hits the panic button. Oh no, this goes way deeper. It is an awe that goes to the very center of our being. It is what biblical writers typically call the fear of the Lord. It's a strange thing. This mighty fear, the fear of the Lord, has the power to inoculate us from the lesser terrors of this world. It's not a fear response that dilates our pupils and freezes our brains. It's instead a deep recognition that we're not in charge and that God is. That we are His creation. He is infinitely more powerful, infinitely more pure and good, infinitely more loving and merciful than ourselves. We're in the presence of perfection, in the form of a loving Father. And when we are in that place, we experience a different kind of fear. It's a clean, cleansing, purifying fear. It clarifies. It makes everything come into proper focus. All of a sudden, all the little things in our world just sort of melt away. This is who was sleeping in the boat that night. He is the eye of the storm. And He's present in your boat right now. If He seems to be disengaged, if He seems to be taking a nap, if He seems unconcerned about the storm that you're facing, don't be fooled. He's showing you another way, the path of faith. He's inviting you into another place, the place where your hidden life is to be found. And when He speaks, the storm loses its force. The snakes and the spiders, the blood tests and CAT scans, and all the things that go bump in the night will yield to His command. All He asks of you and me is that we choose the high road of faith and fear Him alone. We bow our heads together. Our Father, I thank You that You're in the boat with us right now. And I pray, Father, that You would just make Yourself known to anyone who needs to know that in a special way right now. Whatever it is that perhaps they were thinking about last night when they went to bed and maybe thought about all night long. A nagging thing that won't go away, that overwhelming set of problems that just seems intractable, seems unfixable. The diagnosis that brings with it all kinds of fears of what the future will hold. Concerns about a loved one, about a child, about a grandchild, about family members, about friends. Lord, whatever those fears might be, Your word tells us that perfect love casts out all fear. And that instead of fearing these things, we can have that awe and fear of You that is not a terror, but rather just a deep respect and love and a resetting of all of our categories. And we can see You take charge. So Lord, we just pray for the Holy Spirit to come right now into each place where fear is present. Spirit of God, we just give you permission to come and just call forth that you would come and you would speak into each of those places. Lord, you would speak to people right now. I want to encourage you just to let God talk to you now. It may not be an audible sound at all, just an impression. That's how the hidden life works. That's how what we're learning on Wednesday nights about how to just hear God. Over the next few moments, we're going to be partaking of the Lord's table, the bread and the cup. Talk about being able to sleep in the boat. Jesus could give us this beautiful, beautiful remembrance of himself, knowing full well that within hours he would be hanging on a cross for us. He loved us that much. He would walk that dark path so that we would never walk it alone. We would never be able to say, God, you don't understand what it feels like. He could walk that with us. So we invite you, Holy Spirit, just to speak your peace to the storms that are present in our hearts right now. And Lord, show us how to come into that hidden life where we can sleep with you in the middle of a storm. And we ask this in Jesus' name.